Hi there, it's Ben from World Have Your Say. This is a download from the BBC. If you want to read our terms of use, go to bbcworldservice.com/podcasts. Here's today's programme.
We've heard the news from the BBC. Now it's your turn.
You can post on facebook.com/World Have Your Say or get in touch via Twitter at BBC_WHYS.
Welcome to World Have Your Say.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Rabia Limbardo. New proposals have been put forward to change the rules governing who can access Jerusalem's Western Wall, Judaism's holiest site. A campaign led by women's rights activists in Israel has been calling for change which would allow men and women to perform religious rituals together. As it stands, the Western Wall is divided into men and women's sections. Ultra-Orthodox views oppose mixed prayers. Under the new plan, though, a new permanent area would be created for mixed and women-led prayers. It would be in an area on a lower level where limited prayer is already allowed, but which mainly serves as an archaeological site. The new area would be renovated with a platform, placing it at the same level as the rest of the Western Wall. Reformists are calling it a watershed moment for liberal Judaism. Do you agree? And what do you make of the new proposal? You can post your thoughts on our Facebook page, facebook.com/World Have Your Say, or you can tweet us using the hashtag WHYS.
If you don't want to make an international call, text country code 447786 20 60 80 and put "Call Me" in your message.
We have a number of guests to discuss this on the programme. With me in the studio is Rabbi Dr. Moshe Freedman from the United Synagogue here in London. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much.
And on the line from Israel, we have Hallel Silverman, who's at the Women of the Wall campaign. Hello, Hallel.
Hi.
Hello. And why don't you talk to us about what happened this morning? Because you were down at the site this morning. Tell us what happened.
5 women were arrested this morning. They were actually brought into court, but they dropped the charges. The judge didn't feel there was a real reason for them to be taken in, thank God. But it's always unnerving when some of us get taken away.
And you were down at the Western Wall holding your monthly prayer meeting there. What were you doing?
We were praying.
And
what do you mean what were we doing?
In the area that's currently prescribed only for men?
No, we were in the women's section, but we were wearing talitot, prayer shawl.
And what was
which the Haredim don't agree that women should wear.
And what was the atmosphere like when you were there?
Well, when you focused on the group, on the women, it was warm and it was lovely, and you just got carried away in the voices and the prayer. But if you opened up, if you looked up, if you opened your eyes, there's Haredi men yelling at us. You know, we've had chairs thrown at us. It's scary. It really is. And it's terrible that Jews wouldn't feel safe praying in one of the holiest sites.
And with that in mind, what do you make of the new proposals that have been put forward?
I think they're good. I really appreciate that Sharansky is agreeing to egalitarian section, but I do worry that women still won't feel safe from the Haredim.
Do you think they go far enough?
Again?
Do you think the plans that have been put forward go far enough?
I hope one day that we'll be able to continue moderating it, but I think for now it's an amazing step.
Okay, stay there, Hallel, because I want to turn to Rabbi Moshe Freedman here in the studio in London. What do you make of the new proposals?
Well, I agree they're a very good compromise by Natan Sharansky, and in fact it's important to note that the original compromise started in 2003 with this area around Robinson's Arch and the southern wall of the temple. And in fact, the Western Wall itself has very great significance, but in fact it's the temple site itself which has the significance for Jewish people. The Western Wall was the only area that Jews could access. The southern wall, in fact, has an equal religious significance because it's also part of the temple complex. And I do hope that the women of the wall and those women who wish to pray in the way that they do accept this compromise and accept that this is probably the best way forward.
Hallel, will you be accepting this proposal, as the rabbi suggests? I think Halal's line has just dropped off. Maybe we'll try and get her back. But I can introduce Stav Shafir, who's a member of the Israeli Knesset. Hi there, Stav.
Hello.
Hello. I wondered if you were able to hear what Rabbi Moshe was saying there. Do you think the Women of the Wall campaign will accept the new proposals?
I couldn't hear what Moshe was saying. I'm sorry. If you can repeat that.
I said that I thought it was a very good suggestion by Sharansky, and I do hope that they accept it. But I'm concerned because I feel that people don't understand that the Western Wall and the Southern Wall, and in fact the Eastern Wall and the Northern Wall, are all equally walls of the temple complex, and it's the temple itself which was the holy site, not the wall itself. So I hope that they accept this compromise of having a Southern Wall area.
Yes, I have to say that if everything, the question that should be asked here is, if everything is really sacred in the same way, then why is it organized in that manner, in the manner that allows the women to be in a separate area, very far away from where the more commonplace is? The new offer is not bad, and I think that it allows a platform for a compromise. But until the offer is accepted, and until a new platform is created for prayer for all kinds of religious beliefs, it is certainly unnecessary to continue to arrest and detain the women of the wall for wearing a talit during the prayer. This is completely ridiculous and a false usage of our police, I think.
What happens now, Stav? What processes does this proposal have to go through to be able to make it official?
Throughout the years, a lot of proposals were made. I think that we're actually standing in front of a much bigger, a much greater struggle. It's important to mention, because I know that this is not very clear outside of Israel. But in Israel, the perception of religion and how religion is practiced is in many ways very narrow. Most religious Judaism in Israel is controlled and dominated by one section of religion, by the Orthodox section, by the Haredim and the Orthodox, and that invades our most intimate spheres, like marriage, like divorce, like gender, like sexual preferences. Everything is under the rule of the Orthodox. I'm not talking about the actual law of the state, but I'm talking about everything that's related to religion, that's related to our marriage institutions, and so on. And
exactly. Why should the smallest group of Judaism control the whole country, and how we all have to be?
Exactly. That's exactly the idea. Yes, that's the question.
Right.
Why is it all dominated by one section of Judaism? It's not even the majority of it. But why is our religion dominated by one section of it? How can it be? Is that suitable for 2013?
Stav, just a moment, because I think Rabbi would like to respond to that.
Just to bring it back to the
conversation very well.
Sorry, not at all. Just to bring it back to the issue of the Western Wall, you're right, the Orthodox do represent one minority, and in fact, I just want to correct one thing that you said. The Orthodox are not just Haredim. I happen to be part of the United Synagogue, which is a very broad synagogue and accepts Jews from all sorts of backgrounds, some who are religious and some who aren't. And the Orthodox do form a minority in general in Israel. However, the use of the Western Wall Plaza is almost exclusively from Orthodox groups having prayer services all the way through. And in fact,
if it was more equal, it wouldn't be exclusively used by the Orthodox.
The truth is, though,
other parts of Judaism would feel more welcome.
Well, I don't think that going there and praying in a reasonable way under the jurisdiction and the rules of the plaza is impossible. Women have had the right to pray at the Western Wall as well as men. What you're asking for is something different. Of course, freely. Of course, women go to the Western Wall all of the time to pray, but just not in the way that you want to.
Exactly,
that's the difference.
Which isn't freely.
Okay, but this is why we're now at a stage after a few decades of getting to a compromise.
Another kind of Judaism.
Okay, absolutely fine. So you want to do something different. You've protested. You've made your point. That's absolutely fine. And politicians like Sharansky have reacted and have proposed some sort of compromise, which I do hope. As an Orthodox Jew, it's a lot to say that I hope that this compromise goes through and that you have the ability to practice your religious freedoms. But I want you to realise that the way that these protests are being conducted is a little bit like you want to assert your religious freedoms and religious rights by trampling over the other religious rights of the Haredim.
No.
That's not fair.
The idea was never to trample over their rights. The idea was just to be heard and seen and understood that we have another way of practicing our Judaism and that we deserve to...
You must have realised, though, that going there, doing this over and over again,
how
and
else
antagonising
are we supposed to get the attention, though? How else?
Not at all. There are wonderful diplomatic processes in Israel. Israel is a very free country where people can have a very loud voice and have a very big influence in politics. Look at what's happened recently in the elections, where you have all sorts of different new people coming into the Knesset. And in fact, at this particular time, the sensitivities in the Haredi community are very high because the Haredim have lost their political clout in the Knesset and are now feeling under much more pressure that they don't have as much of a voice as they used to have. So doing these sorts of things can be very, very antagonistic.
But even before they lost the political voice, they were still yelling at us and throwing chairs at us.
And that's not acceptable at all. And it is absolutely reprehensible.
You know, the police should be arresting the people harassing us and throwing things at us, not the people trying to pray.
I agree with you 100%. They should be arresting those individuals and they should be putting them in court. Absolutely right. It is reprehensible. But what I'm telling you is that because we know that there are very significant sensitivities there, it's highly antagonistic to continue this sort of protest month after month when really most people from the outside will look at you and think this is not about prayer, this is about protest and media attention. And I do understand that.
It's not a protest, it's a prayer service.
I know that's what you'll tell me, but most people will view it from the outside as a type of protest by which you'll want to get media attention in order to further your cause.
Rabbi Moshe, just stay there just a moment, Hallel. I just want to introduce Jonathan Rosenblum, who's a columnist for the Jerusalem Post. Hello there, Jonathan.
Hi, how are you?
Very well, thank you. And I know you wrote an extensive piece today about the new proposal, but just picking up a bit on what the rabbi and both what Hallel were debating there. I want to give you a quote from Anna Hoffman, who's leading the organisation Women of the Wall. She says, "This is a compromise, a sign of maturity and understanding of what's at stake here." Does it send out a strong, positive signal that the Orthodox power is ready to engage more? Is that what it sends out?
Well, I don't know. Are you talking about Sharansky's proposal?
Yes.
I don't think in point of fact, the Supreme Court ordered, the Israeli Supreme Court ordered many years ago that a separate section should be set aside for prayer in any form, egalitarian prayer, men and women together, non-traditional forms of prayer. And the Orthodox have basically abided by that. They have not harassed groups who are praying there at an extension. What all Sharansky has done is put a few bells and whistles on that, and that was really basically the Supreme Court's order to achieve a certain modus vivendi there. But there's no question the majority of people who come to the Kotel, to come to the Western Wall to pray at any given time, are engaged in individual prayer. They're pouring out their hearts not in communal forms of prayer, but in individual prayer. And that the Kotel is open to anybody to pray any prayer that they want in any language that they want. No one is silent there. If you understand prayer as a communication between the person and God, then that is open and equally to every single person who comes to the Kotel. What we have here is really an attempt to use the Kotel to make a political statement about validation of a particular form of prayer, but it is a political statement. Anat Hoffman, who you just mentioned, who is one of the heads of the reform movement in Israel. Now, the same reform movement has said there is no particular sanctity to the Western Wall. We do not pray for the rebuilding of the temple. We do not pray for the reinstitution of temple sacrifices. This is not Jewish prayer and sanctity in our time. In other words, the Kotel, which is the greatest symbol of Jewish continuity, is instead being turned into a place for performance and, as you say, gathering media attention. It's a tremendous fundraiser among heterodox...
Jonathan, we don't have much time, so I want to allow some of our other guests to respond to that. Stav, what would you say to what Jonathan is saying there about it being a political statement?
I have to say something to correct what was said before. Yes, it's not the Haredi society only. It's the Orthodox. And I think that we have to ask ourselves a very simple question. What kind of religion, or how do we want our religion to look? How do we want it to be? And how do we want the connection between our religion and our state to be and become in the coming years? Do we want men and women to be able to practice religion equally? Do we want religion to be open to all sections of society? Do we want to allow new people to enter the religious world or to practice it in the way they feel like it? Or do we want to make it closed and segregated? And do we want to privatize it, to make it belong to only one section of it? I think that's the question that should be asked. I mean, the current government in Israel, a government that puts, the term new politics is constantly coming to the headlines. And if it's indeed new politics, so I want to see for the first time in decades a new view religion can be in Israel and how open and inviting it can be.
Stav, you make a very interesting point about a new view and a new religion. It's quite ironic, in fact, that women and others as well should be demanding an egalitarian service near the site of the temple, which is in fact the paradigm for separating men and women and the paradigm for all Orthodox synagogues and why we separate women and men during prayer services. The traditional Judaism does go back all the way to that temple time, and the reason that it's the holiest site in Judaism is it's because it's the paradigm for Orthodox Judaism. So you are talking about changing religion in a way that has never been done before, in fact goes against the grain of traditional Judaism. And
it's not, you don't have to change the entire concept of religion. You don't have to. I'm not saying that don't separate men and women. If you want, create three different sections.
That's fine. I agree with you.
Than one commune.
I agree with you, but don't tell me that it's the same thing and it's an equal partner in Judaism. It is a development for some people, and it's important for Israel as a place of democracy and freedom for women to be able to express their prayer in whichever way they want, and men as well, if they want to have egalitarian services. But that shouldn't compromise on a traditional Orthodox service and the way that prayer has been carried out at the Western Wall.
Can I add something here?
Sure, Jonathan.
I mean, this issue here is not sincerity. Let's be clear about one thing. This prayer service that the women of the wall conduct could be conducted in 1,000 places in Israel. There's no place in Israel where they cannot conduct their services as they wish. They're talking about going to the one place which represents Jewish continuity, a continuity that goes back 3,000 years.
Absolutely.
This is a religion of law. It's not determined by the sincerity of each individual believer. That's a pagan approach to religion. If I believe it sincerely, if it affects me sincerely, then it must be valid. That's not the Jewish approach. That's not Jewish religion. We're simply saying that this particular place, which represents Jewish continuity, whose power comes from the fact that it is the last remnant of the temple that stood there 2,000 years ago, a temple for which most of the people participating in these heterodox prayer services do not seek that it should be returned, but which gives it its power to the Jews who come there, both religious and non-religious, that we shouldn't alter the structure there, just as you wouldn't expect a Protestant revival meeting to take place in St. Peter's Square, just as you would not expect Jews for Jesus to be permitted to worship, do a Christian service at the Kotel. So just because somebody says, I really want to do this.
It's completely different level.
No, I asked one of the leaders of the women from the Kotel 15 years ago, I asked her, could you say that there would be anything invalid about a Jews for Jesus service there? And she said, I can't answer that question.
In that vein, just a moment.
That's individual opinion.
Jonathan Hallel Stav, just bear with me a moment. I want to ask Jonathan one question. In that vein, Jonathan, is religion always more important than women's rights?
See, you're trying to impose modern terminology and modern thought on a religion that precedes that. I don't know. The abstract question is religion is more important than women's rights. With respect to this particular place, what great right would be violated for people who don't recognize even the special sanctity of that place to not daven, I'm quoting Hillel Halpin, a non-religious writer in Israel, what would you be sinning against if you chose not to go to the one place where you're guaranteed to arouse the greatest degree of hostility and anger? If you chose to daven, if you chose to pray as you wish in wherever you want except this one place, would you go to St. Peter's Square and start carrying on your prayer service there?
Okay, well, let me introduce Ita Simmons to the conversation. Hi, Ita, who's in London. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. What have you been making of what you've been hearing?
Well, my stomach is simply churning. I mean, honestly, this Western Wall is the symbol of sanctity. It's the last remnant of sanctity which we have from this temple, the glorious, tangible temple where the glory of God rested. It was taken away from us because we sinned. All we have is the wall, a symbol that all Jews hold very, very holy and important. And we cry there, what is the matter with people today? Why are women not as equal as men? We surely are. Our prayers aren't just before those of women. But why do we have to be together with men? For goodness sake, are we not strong enough to be on our own? And do we need a man next to us to come close to God? Or do we want the Western Wall to be merely a relic, a bunch of stones?
Rabbi Moshe is listening to what you're saying here. It's a very different way of looking at it, actually, isn't it?
Very much so. And it's very interesting because, in fact, all of our prayer and the idea of prayer comes from the story of Hannah, who went, of course, to the temple when it was in Shiloh and prayed. And in fact, she was the paradigm for Jewish prayer. It came from a woman. And in fact, we believe in Judaism that women have an inherent connection and access to God that men don't have. But, it's important, therefore, for men to have that sort of structure of prayer 3 times a day in order for us to achieve those same heights that women can have, almost instantaneously.
Their emotions. Through the emotional connection with God, we can get close to God at our kitchen sink, washing up the dishes.
I just want to say that I do most of the dishes in our household.
Okay, well, you can do it both ways. The fact that women want to remove the sanctity, the bit of sanctity that we have in the holiest place on earth, the holiest place recognized by the whole world. The whole world is after our little tiny Israel. They all want it, and they certainly want Jerusalem, the centre of the world.
Ita, I'm sorry to interrupt, but is this a generational thing?
What do you mean generational thing?
Do you think the younger generation who are more attuned to women's rights would want something more so than the older generation?
Look, I am a Hasidic lady, right? But I'm speaking now from my desk as chief executive of a housing association. I run a housing association. I'm a highly professional woman, yet I'm a Hasidic woman, and I'm a woman of the world, and I have 7 children, countless grandchildren, and I can tell you it's got absolutely nothing to do with generation. We believe in God, and we believe in the Torah that was given on Mount Sinai through Moses, and we keep it that way. We don't want to change it. There's nothing better than that. Throughout generations, we have seen philosophies and theories and societies change and rebel and may have revolutions to create better societies. There is no better philosophy than the Torah, and we want to keep to it. And thank goodness there are plenty of people who keep it. And those who don't should not disturb those who do want to advance Torah life, who advance a life of keeping to the Torah the way it was handed down to Moses.
Ita, I'm going to have to interrupt, but thank you. It's been great talking to you. Thank you so much for taking part and well to have your say. Rabbi Moshe, you want to just pick up very quickly on one of the things that she was saying there? You were gesturing to say something.
I mean, just to say that represents, I think, a very profound view of Jewish tradition going back through the generations. And I think Jonathan also made the point of continuity, and the fact that the temple for us was destroyed because of our sins in the year 70 by the Romans means that it's become a focus of Jewish hope. but the paradigm of temple service was of men and women being separated, and therefore a new innovation, these services where men and women are together, goes against the grain, not just of Orthodox Judaism, but of thousands of years of Jewish tradition.
Rabbi Moshe, thank you so much for coming in to
It's a
World Have
pleasure.
Your Say. You can continue the conversation online, World Have Your Say, on our Facebook page, facebook.com/World Have Your Say. Now, on our later edition of the programme at 1700 GMT, you'll be able to hear questions about life in North Korea being answered by two people who have defected from that country. One of the questions we received was the extent of truth in reports of people turning to cannibalism because of the famine-like conditions in North Korea.
저희가 대학교 다닐 때 약간 좀 그런 일은 있었거든요. 근데 인육을 먹는다는 게
When I was in university, that had happened. It's due to hallucination caused by severe hunger. People don't even realize the act as murder and eat the flesh, but that is very, very rare.
I heard about cannibalism a lot too. I heard that it was during the Great Famine when many were dying of starvation. I heard that people sold and ate human flesh. They were killing other families' babies and selling the flesh after burying the head and fingers, so human flesh would not be recognizable. I heard some people were punished after the body parts were discovered. The rumor prevailed. It's horrible. I thought it was a rumor, but the parents-in-law of my acquaintance had a butcher and were publicly executed. Public execution is conducted to warn the public against committing the same crime.
Well, you can hear more from that conversation about life in North Korea at 1700 GMT here on World Have Your Say. Coming up next on the BBC World Service is Outlook with Matthew Bannister. Thanks for joining us. Continue the conversation online. You can tweet us using the hashtag WHYS. Thanks for listening.